You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that reveals facts, truth, research, and statistics and never messes around. With your hosts, Taylor Phillips, Ed Smith, Frank Vashner, and Buck Geno. We lay down the entire truth about everything regarding your Detroit and Michigan sports teams, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Follow me, Taylor Phillips, on Twitter at DT2Phillips with 2 L's. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313. Follow Frank Vashner at Frank_Vashner, VAJCNER. And follow Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno3rd. Also like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth, and join our Facebook group with the same name. The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
Episode 294 is in session. Taylor Phillips and Buck Geno with you guys. Not much to recap, except for the Lions, Michigan Wolverines basketball against UCLA, the Pistons, and the Red Wings, plus a few topics to discuss, including Jim Caldwell's future, the Boban Marjanovic Andre Drummond continuous comparison, the Red Wings getting blown out yet again by the St. Louis Blues, continuing to piss off Ken Holland, and the Tigers finally having Alan Trammell and Jack Morris elected to the Hall of Fame and planning to retire their numbers in August. Plus, we'll have the 5 questions and what's your grade segments at the end of the show. But first off, let's recap the Lions and Buccaneers.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
The Lions jumped out to a 21-7 lead slowly but surely, but they coughed it up. And then with at least 20 seconds left, another Matt Prater game-winning field goal. Just the same tease that the Lions have used to find ways to win against another bad team in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like they did in Chicago against the Bears a few weeks ago. And they've got the Bears this upcoming Saturday at 4:30 on the NFL Network. But the Lions blow a 21-7 lead and let the Buccaneers, the then 4-8 Buccaneers, who are now 4-9, to tie it back up at 21. But the Lions would not let the Buccaneers force overtime because they decided to dial that Matt Prater phone number button successfully, and it usually works. At least it has always worked in situations like this. Just leave it to Matt Prater.
Well, I mean, you look at the game, and the first half and a little bit more, it was pretty clear that Tampa Bay offensively wasn't going to be able to get much going. And then the Lions just kind of laid back and let them get back into the game, tying the score at 21 apiece. And at that point, you had to feel like there was pressure on the Detroit Lions at that point, simply because the Tampa Bay Bucs, who came into the game at 4-8, had nothing to play for. The Detroit Lions are still fighting for their playoff lives, so to speak. So all the pressure on them after giving up a 14-point lead in the second half. I think the one thing for most Lions fans that they were pleased with was it wasn't a terrible start. It wasn't great, but the Bucs kind of helped them out with that as well. But they weren't down 20 in the first half, so that was a marked improvement over what they've been able to give the last 4 games. And the Lions did just enough to get a victory. And when you look at the overall game, there's pluses and minuses in every NFL game. You can go over it with a fine-tooth comb. I think really the big thing was Matthew Stafford, even though he was hurt last week, didn't look like he was affected much. It didn't try to throw the ball that much downfield. A lot of that is because the Bucs tend to play off in coverage. they don't play aggressive press coverage. Mike Smith, the former Atlanta Falcons head coach, now the Tampa Bay defensive coordinator, who's probably going to be the former Tampa Bay defensive coordinator after this year, he really doesn't bring his guys up to play in the face of the receivers. So there wasn't a lot of deep balls to be had, but man, Stafford was all over the 0 to 10 yard passes, and they took what the defense was giving them and were able to do just enough to get the victory and get into Matt Prater's field goal range to get the winning point. So it's a victory, moved to 7-6, but the other problem for them is they have all these teams in front of them. Carolina, the Falcons. Those are the next two opponents for Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay, by what you saw today, they ain't going to beat Atlanta, and they're not going to beat Carolina. So if you're the Lions, you're happy that you won, but the other problem is that everybody ahead of you won. So it's not just winning. You need help from other teams to get into the playoffs. So even if they were to win out in those 6, it's far from a guarantee that they would make the playoffs with that. So they have nobody else but themselves to blame or thank, depending on how you want to view it. And after today, the positives that you take away were that Matt Stafford still looked like he could throw the football with effectiveness. His hand wasn't that bad. But again, they didn't really test it going down the field because of the way the Tampa Bay was playing. If I'm Tampa Bay, boy, I know that Mike Smith doesn't really like to play press coverage. Their corners aren't very good. But if you're going to make them do something, make them go deep. Make Matt Stafford use that injured hand as much as possible by throwing it as far as he can down the field and trying to get the deep balls. And if you get burned, you get burned. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played not to lose, and so many times that we've seen that in the game of football, when you play not to lose, you end up losing because you let the other team inch its way down the field, get what they can get, and end up taking the game right out from under you. So that's what we saw today, an inferior opponent that didn't have the greatest strategy, and Detroit was able to take advantage of it, albeit by only a 3-point margin. Their third quarter was not good, and into the fourth quarter they finally got it squared around. So for the Lions, they did what they had to do, like I said before. It'll be interesting to see what they do next week, Saturday, against the Bears. Both teams coming off a shorter week because of that Saturday game. The Bears coming off a win against Cincinnati at Cincinnati, which is not really a great feat, but for a team that has struggled like the Bears have, they'll have a little momentum coming into this game. It'll be a division game for them at Ford Field. And when you have division teams, the thing that you'd like most is if you're not going to have a successful year, you want to make sure that other people in your division don't have a successful year. So the Bears will have that motivation coming into Ford Field on Saturday, and we'll see how the Lions react.
Yeah. And speaking of the Lions, their head coach, Jim Caldwell, I heard this morning prior to the game, his future will be determined after this season. His extension is only good through 2018. That's part of the news that I read this morning before I left for work. And I thought this could give me a hint on something here. This could give us all a hint on what his future may hold after this season is all said and done.
Well, and the timing of this coming to bear isn't lost on a lot of people. The fact that today they talked about his extension only being for next year and a team option at that. The extension he got last year was pretty well guarded secret through the organization, and none of the terms were released, and none of the figures were ever really able to be found. But this week it was interesting, and Ian Rappaport, I believe, was the first to put something out there on Twitter, and then everybody else kind of joined in, that it was rumored to have an extension through last year, or from last year and through this year, which was the one-year contract, and then next year and possibly the year after at team option. So while it wasn't wrong that the Lions said they signed Caldwell to a multi-year extension, it kind of splits hairs a little bit because a team option really isn't a multi-year deal. It's basically you're working on a year-to-year contract that tells tells you how much you're going to make if you're retained. So, like I said, they weren't lying, but they didn't really bring forth the whole truth either. And so Jim Caldwell, this year, this is his last contractual year that he is obligated to, and then the team will make that decision going forward. So if they wanted to get rid of him, they could get rid of him and really get away with nothing other than having this year be a total bust.
Because they can't admit the truth, because they can't handle the truth.
Well, he should never have been given the extension to start with. I mean, you had a team that last year was 9-3, or 9-4, excuse me. Sputtered down the stretch, lost the division on the last day of the season to the Packers. Went into a wild card game against Seattle and just got housed. And it was quite apparent that they were kind of in the middle of what I like to term the blob of the NFL. There's 2 or 3 really good teams. You look at the Eagles now with Carson Wentz out. Are they still going to be up there or not? You look at teams like the Patriots and other teams that are there for pretty much a consistent period of time. Then you have really bad teams. You have like the Browns of the world that just aren't any good. And in the middle of that, you just kind of have a blob of teams that are anywhere between 5-11 and 11-5 that, given on any given Sunday, can win or lose a game. And if they string enough together, they can get into the playoffs. And you felt like the Lions were just kind of at the top of that heap at that point where they were not really competitive as a contender standpoint, but they were able to get into the playoffs and say that they made it on the strength of their first 12 games. So that said, Jim Caldwell's extension really, a lot of people disagreed with it because it was pretty obvious that his staff was overmatched in a lot of those games, and it came into this year. The same things are happening that happened last year, going into games like the Ravens last week where they had literally double the time to prepare that the Ravens did, and they came out with that in the first half. And the Ravens basically took it to them in the first half and sealed the game off in that first half. And then you come out against Tampa Bay today, and even though your quarterback's banged up, you're playing a pretty poor football team in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And you're only able to come away with a 3-point win after having a 14-point lead in the second half. So Jim Caldwell's team, his staff, they don't come to play winning football. There's a rumor that Terrell Austin, who is the defensive coordinator, he really wants to be a head coach the worst way, and he could be chasing college jobs now that the pro jobs really haven't opened up. He could be looking for a college job, and that could be taken away from what his attention should be on right now, so that's getting the Lions to a playoff spot. There's just a lot of things being thrown out there, and for the Lions, it feels like it's par for the course, but I think for Jim Caldwell, the biggest against him would be the fact that they just don't look prepared on a week in and week out basis. I mean, 9 guys on the field last week. I mean, how does that happen at professional football at a level of
how does it happen at any level?
Right. I mean, I the high school games we do, Taylor, I don't think I've ever seen 9 kids on the field.
No.
10? Yeah, that can happen. I get 10. Somebody doesn't hear,
yeah,
I get 10 or 12. 9? 9.
Man, 9.
And they ran the play. It's not like they had 9 and they had guys scrambling all around and they just got caught off guard. They ran the play with 9 guys out. They didn't even call a timeout. They ran the play. Or the Ravens. They let the Ravens run the play on a third down with 9 guys out there.
That's still ridiculous.
How are you? How do you let that go? How does somebody just not employed after that? That's the kind of thing that the Lions do is they let those kind of guys hang around. They extend Jim Caldwell because they didn't want to go with a new coach, and now they're reaping what they sow, which is getting more of the same. And his contract extension, like I said, it's kind of ambiguous, but what's being reported by multiple sources now is that it's a multi-year extension in the way that he got this year, and then everything else from here on out was a team option. So They basically just put him on a year-to-year plan, but called it a multi-year option or a multi-year contract because it had language for more than 1 year. So that said, if they miss the playoffs this year, I just don't see them bringing him back. It would be ludicrous to think that they couldn't get another coach to coach this collection of players who, if you look at the Lions from top down, they're not really that bad. Yes, they have glaring weaknesses, but they're not a Super Bowl champion. But boy, they're better than 7-6 and not being able to beat teams that had half the rest time that they did and going to play them on a Sunday afternoon and losing by 20. They're better than that. And I don't think the coaching staff puts them in a position to win. And when you look at the NFL, you can break it down to X's and O's and who's where and who's not supposed to be where. The coaches, if they don't prepare the team, if they don't come out with a good game plan, I don't care who you have. You look at the Patriots this year, early in the season. Their defense was awful. And they made the adjustments, and now they're back to a reasonable level of football. And they're winning games, and they're going to win their division again. But the first 2 games, the Patriots literally couldn't stop anybody. And people were just thinking, boy, are they over? And they finally hit that wall where they're going to be done. And Matt Patricia, who's one of those people that has been thrown around if Jim Caldwell was fired, got his defense squared away, and they're back to respectable football. But that's what the Lions don't have that. The Lions just keep doing what they do because it's a lot easier than changing things. And it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason, because if they go 10-6 and miss the playoffs, I don't put it past them to just extend the Caldwell to the next year and go through this whole charade again.
No. But then again, Martha Ford still likes Jim Caldwell for some reason, and it's just called not having the passion, kind of like Chris Hillich, not having the passion for either the Tigers or the Red Wings. And that's just Detroit itself. So hopefully we'll have a Jim Caldwell firing, but that's got to be one of our 5 questions, to say the least. So that's Lions. So we're going to transition to college basketball. Hang on a second. Let me add this here. Lions again play at home against the Chicago Bears Saturday at 4:30 on NFL Network. Now to Michigan basketball.
For 3, yes, sir.
The Wolverines came back from down 15, and they beat the UCLA Bruins 78-69 in overtime at Chrysler Center. The Wolverines have had a losing streak against the UCLA Bruins for quite some time, but now it's over with. Michigan finally beat UCLA. And that's got to feel good. Buck, are you there? Buck? Buck? Well, UCLA turned the ball over 20 times. Hey, Buck. We're still on the air. UCLA turned the ball over 20 times, and they shot less than 25% from three-point range. And Michigan took advantage. Came back from down 15. They used the home crowd on their home court, and they responded. They sprang to life. They forced overtime. Mm-hmm. Well, we apologize for the technical difficulties here. Hey, Buck, are you still there? Oh, no. Hey, Buck, are you still there? Buck?
No.
Oh, yeah, we apologize for the technical difficulties. But can you hear me now, or I couldn't hear you? Yep.
Okay. Don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. I flipped to a different internet source. I don't know if that was the problem or not, but we're back on.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Michigan in overtime came back from down 15 to beat the UCLA Bruins 78-69. The Bruins turned the ball over 20 times. They shot less than 25% from three-point range. And the Wolverines somehow took advantage, and they got the victory by 9.
Yeah, well, before we were rudely interrupted by the vagaries of the internet, it's a real disappointing loss on Monday. When they played Ohio State, they were up by 20. They ended up losing by 9. And they come back on Saturday, and they find themselves in the reverse situation where they were down by 15. Until they fought back to this overtime and really dominated the overtime session. And it's a real uplifting win for them because, had they lost that game to Ohio State and then lost that game to UCLA at home in the fashion they were losing it in, it would have been real disheartening going in the last stretch of their non-conference schedule here. And instead they were able to pull it out and beat a UCLA team that, even though they're not ranked, is always a team that they have trouble with. And I think for Michigan to win that game was a real big stepping stone for them. They'll take on Texas here on Tuesday, another big game for them. And hopefully they can right the ship and get things moving on to Big Ten conference play.
Yep. That could give Michigan some momentum after Saturday here.
Well, if you look at the game, how it played out, defensively, they played all right, but they just couldn't make anything. They scored 27 points in the first half, but their shooting wasn't real spot on. Offensively, they were struggling. And then Xavier Simpson came off the bench and hit 15 points. It was really a catalyst in that comeback. Muhammad Ali Abdurrahman, the starting guard for them, only had 8 points, even though he played all 44 or almost 44 minutes. And then, I think that Xavier Simpson coming off the bench in the play of Charles Matthews, especially in the second half, really propelled them to the win. Beeline had to go to his bench a little bit more than he thought he would have to, and he actually went 5 deep, which is not a rotation that he probably is comfortable with, but he was mixing and matching some lineups and found one that worked, and they got him the win.
Yeah. So there you go. Now we transition from college basketball to pro basketball.
Left sideline 3, and he answers.
The Pistons' losing streak has now reached 6, at least. They lost to the Spurs by 3 points on the road, 96-93. They lost to the Milwaukee Bucks again by 4, 104-100. They lost to the defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors 102-98. Those games were pretty damn close, but then they lost to the Boston Celtics 91-81. The last 2 games, though, Boban Marjanovic played, and let's go ahead and compare him to Andre Drummond offensively. Not defensively, but offensively. Boban Marjanovic scored 12 points in his last 12 minutes, and Andre Drummond 14 points in his last 66 minutes.
You are pathetic!
Andre Drummond obviously not doing it on the offensive side for the Detroit Pistons. And you're going to have that. You're going to have lulls, but against the type of competition that they're playing right now, they really need him to come to the fore, and they just haven't gotten that. And Stan Van Gundy starting to insert Boban a little bit more. He played the game against Boston, in which they ended up losing. They put him in for a couple of minutes, and Andre Drummond was, even though he was active on the boards, just didn't get a lot done on the offensive end. And they need more than 6 points out of him if you're going to beat Boston. That's just how it's got to be. And it's one of those things where if you're putting Boban Marjanovic in, he's going to be there for offense because we know that defensively he's not the best. But when you're struggling offensively as Andre Drummond is, it's great that he got 15 boards against the Celtics, but 6 points isn't going to help you. I mean, you can get anybody to score 6 points. You really need to kick it in the rear on the offensive side, and I think that Boban, in his limited time, has been able to do that.
Limited time is only 2 minutes against Boston. Scored 2 points.
Yeah, and it's tough right now because they leave Drummond in because he's still doing most of the things they're asking him to. He's getting on the boards, he's hitting the glass, but he's just not scoring like he should be if he wants to be the centerpiece of the franchise. I mean, 6 points is not going to get it done. And they mixed and matched a little bit, but Boston was obviously too much for them. And in the last stretch of games, they've been putting Boban in with regularity, if not for a long time. At least they've been putting him into the lineup. So, gaining some confidence with the coaching staff, and Andre Drummond continues to struggle on the offensive end. Really wouldn't surprise me to see Boban get some extended minutes, try to wake the offense up, at least on the front court side.
I have to agree. You got to give Boban Marjanovic extended time, at least for some extra offense. And the Pistons only got 81 points because Boban only played 2 minutes and scored 2 points, just 2 points as a result, when Stan Van Gundy should have played him somewhat longer than 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the stat lines and how they were playing. If you take Drummond out of the lineup, the problem becomes that they don't have somebody that can get a lot of rebounds other than him right now. And yes, Boban should be able to get some, but is he going to get 15? I don't know if he'll get there, but that's the problem they face right now, because Andre Drummond is able to get those rebounds and put the ball back for them. But if you're not scoring, then all those possessions that you're getting on the glass are going by the wayside because you're not able to score the basketball. So I think that Boban, they're trying to bring him along slow. They can't put him out there for 25 minutes because he's just not used to it. But I would say that with the shortening of Eric Moreland's minutes, it's coming at the expense of Boban coming in for offensive purposes. And again, it's one of those catch-22s. If you take Drummond out, who's going to rebound the basketball? At least as effective as he has been. But then you have to look at, on the offensive end, can we get more points out of our 5 spot than 6 points over 31 minutes, which you should be able to do.
Yeah, you got to have more points in less minutes as a center. That's the point. That's going to be one of our 5 questions for this episode here. See, the Pistons have the Denver Nuggets coming to downtown Detroit Tuesday at 7, and then they go to Atlanta on Thursday, and then to Indiana on Friday. Then they're back home against the Orlando Magic Sunday at 4.
Well, I mean, yeah, the Nuggets coming in, and then they have the Hawks and the Pacers, who have been pretty resurgent now with the way that they're playing. So they're going to be tested in this week. It's another week with 4 games in it. So you're going to have to use your bench a little bit. And you would think that the way that Boban's playing offensively, you might see him a little bit more. And if they struggle offensively with Andre Drummond in the lineup, you may see him coming in with a little bit more regularity. But the fact remains that the Pistons right now are just struggling offensively as a team. And if you look at the games that they've played, the Warriors, they came back and were within 2 points. And then Reggie Jackson tried to do it himself and failed miserably, and they ended up losing that game by 4. So the Pistons really are kind of caught in the middle here. They've hit a bad stretch. They've played a lot of good teams. Is the one thing that you can say for them is they have played a lot of good teams. But ever since they beat the Celtics a couple of weeks ago, right after Thanksgiving, they've kind of declined. And you look at the competition, they've played all good teams except the Suns. And that's where their losing streak is emanated from, is playing teams that are who they aspire to be, or at least as far as the standings go. And right now, just not getting the job done. And hopefully this week, playing some teams that are a little bit more of their speed, maybe they can get back on the winning track.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Then you got the Red Wings getting humiliated again after they humiliated the Winnipeg Jets 5-1. They get humiliated by the St. Louis Blues 6-1 at home. This is the third time in their last 4 games that they suffered a blowout loss on the ice.
Well, yeah, you give up 6 goals for the third time in 4 games.
Plus.
6 plus. Defensively, just bad. And putting themselves behind the 8 ball. And we said at the beginning of the season that defense was nothing to write home about. But we're really seeing it here with Jimmy Howard and Peter Mrazek not playing their best. Jimmy Howard has given up 16 goals in the last 6 to 8 shots he's faced. Now, are all of those his fault? No, because they're getting a lot of grade A scoring chances. But sometimes you got to lean on your goaltender to make a couple of those saves. And they haven't gotten that from either Mrazek or Howard.
Primary problem is their defense, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you look at your defense, and why are they getting those chances? And it's still the same song and dance that their defense is below average. They're not very good. And when that happens, you're going to get great scoring chances, and even the best in the world at some point are going to give up some goals on those chances. And that's what's happening right now. It's just, through 2 periods yesterday, the Blues had 8 shots, and they had 4 goals. That just tells you how bad they were playing. And, yeah, Howard probably should have had a couple, but you're getting guys that are just getting great scoring chances, and the defensive breakdowns are just atrocious. And even the plays that lead up to those scoring chances, you have guys throwing blind passes, terrible breakouts. It's the same thing over and over again. I think that when you look at this, it really is kind of a microcosm of what they are, which is a bad defensive team. And when they have bad defense, it's hard to get into offensive mode because you don't have the puck. And that's kind of what's happening with Detroit right now. Yeah, they beat the Jets pretty soundly on Tuesday, but that was the really one glimpse of hope. And then they came yesterday to play the Blues, who are a very good team, and just got trounced. So they still have not solved the issues on defense. They probably won't, because they don't have a lot to choose from back there. And people can look at the lack of goal scoring, but you're just giving up way too many good shots to teams that are going to put those in the net. And right now, their defense is deplorable, and they have to get that fixed. At least make it serviceable so that you're not getting those type of scoring chances on your goalie, who right now, regardless of who they're putting in, just aren't making as many big saves as they could. And that's what happens. You lose games 6-1 when you're playing teams that are good and you don't play well defensively.
Yeah, whether it be Nicholas Cronwall, Jonathan Erickson, Danny DeKeyser, Xavier Ouellette, Trevor Daley, Mike Green.
Yeah, you go down the list, and it's not good.
Yeah.
And I think for the Red Wings, really, it all starts with the defense. I mean, if you can get a passable effort out of them, you're probably going to have a decent chance at winning. If you're getting what they got against the Blues, you're not beating a lot of teams. It's just not going to happen.
No. Red Wings play the Florida Panthers Monday. That's tomorrow at 7:30. Then they're home against the Boston Bruins on NBCSN's Wednesday night rivalry at 8 o'clock with Doc Emmerich, Eddie Olczyk, and Pierre McGuire, or Keith Jones filling in for Eddie Olczyk the last week. Wonder where the hell Eddie Olczyk has been, by the way. Then they're home against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Friday before they have 2 days rest. They go to Long Island and play the New York Islanders next Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, you look at the stretch, and they had a lot of games at home, and they're not getting a lot of points. And when you have a lot of games at home in the NHL, you've got to get points in those games, and they're just not doing it right now. And they're getting blown out in spectacular fashion a lot of those times too. And you just got to wonder how long is the rope for guys like Jeff Blashill and Ken Holland, because those are the type of efforts that get guys fired.
Yeah, the only two
6-1 against the Blues. I mean, if they lose that game 3-1,
we're okay.
Okay, you know that's going to happen. But just getting absolutely annihilated at home and giving the type of effort that they did, it was.
That's like almost no effort whatsoever.
Well, they talked about it being embarrassing against Montreal. It certainly wasn't that pretty against St. Louis. And we kind of thought this is the way it would go for the Red Wings. They started out a little bit better than we expected, but we kind of knew that at some point the dam had to break. And so far, these last couple of weeks, we've seen it, especially on the defensive end, that just poor coverage and poor play, and the puck has ended up in their net way too many times.
I heard from Prashant Iyer, and by the way, that the only 2 points that they got was in the win, that facade of a win against the Winnipeg Jets, 5-1 last Tuesday. And prior to that game, Ken Holland was really pissed off at those route wins against those Montreal Canadiens last week. But I heard from Prashant Iyer that the Red Wings are 2-5-3 without Luke Witkowski in his 10-game suspension. Now, Luke Witkowski's a defenseman, and Prashant Iyer is trying to point something out. Luke Witkowski, he's trying to point out that the Red Wings miss him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you missed him, because I don't think he's that great of a defenseman either. I think he does bring a physical element, but
right.
When you're playing teams and you're not competing, regardless if it's a physical game or not, when you're just not competing and not making smart plays, you can be as physical as you want, and you're still going to lose. So I understand that they've kind of hit the skids after Luke Witkowski got suspended, but
for 10 games.
How much of a correlation there is between him being out of the lineup and them playing as poorly as they have?
Right, fans don't miss him. Neither do we.
Yeah, I mean, how many people are saying, "Boy, I wish we had Luke Witkowski back"?
No.
Then we'd be set. It's probably a little bit of a stretch to say that, but I would agree with him that they don't play nearly as physical. But I don't know if that's the reason that they're getting blown out.
No, you gotta play defense as a whole. You gotta you are missing one defenseman, even if he was that great and you're missing him, it still wouldn't be enough. It takes an entire defensive unit, not just one player, but an entire defensive unit to play a lot better defense than how they did against the St. Louis Blues and the Montreal Canadiens.
Right, and it also goes to the forwards who, as we've seen time and time again, in their own end, really being careless with the puck. And, again, not having clean breakouts, not having great zone entries, and turning the puck over and getting in transition for the other team. And that's not a strength of Detroit. They're not a very good transition defense defensive team. They're not great defensively anyway, but when you're putting those guys with the backs to the wall, it's going to be even tougher. And I think that it is a correlation, obviously, with if you look at their record, but I don't think that Luke Witkowski comes back in the lineup, that they're going to magically turn from a non-playoff team to a contender in the East. So I get it. I get where he's going, but yeah, it's a unit. It's a whole team problem, and you've really just got to wonder what type of turmoil is going on in that locker room, because they're not playing well. They're not playing as a team, and it shows on the ice.
Right. So that's Red Wings. Now we transition to baseball and the Tigers.
That one is long gone.
Tigers greats Alan Trammell, the shortstop, and pitcher Jack Morris, starting pitcher, finally were elected to the Hall of Fame by the modern-day era.
I love it.
And they're going to have their numbers retired, number 3 and number 47, in August at Comerica Park this upcoming 2018 season. Better late than never, huh?
Yeah, for Alan Trammell, I think that he was overlooked time and time again. And I think for him to make it, he certainly deserves it. I know that Jack Morris, there's a lot of people that really were on the bandwagon for him to get in. I understand it, but if you look at his career, you're putting him in because he's played well in big games. And I've always been lukewarm on his Hall of Fame candidacy, simply because if you look at his career as a whole, even if you take away the last couple of years of his career where he was certainly on the decline, it's tough for me to say that he was one of the best ever. Was he really good? Yes. He was a very good pitcher. And if you got the ball to him in the playoffs, you had a lot of confidence. But to say that he was a Hall of Famer based on his entire body of work, it was a little subjective. And I know that a lot of people kind of voted with their hearts instead of their heads on that one. And him getting in, which is a great honor for him. But I think the fact that Lou Whitaker not getting in and Gene Morris is getting in still leaves the conversation to be open to, where are we trying to vote in here? Because Lou Whitaker was one of the premier second basemen in the American League and really of all of Major League Baseball at the peak of his career. I don't know if you could say the same about Jack Morris when you're looking at the best pitchers in the 80s. Yes, he was a great playoff pitcher. Yes, he took the ball every time you gave it to him. But, I mean, the guy had almost a career 4 ERA in an era that didn't lend itself exactly to offensive prowess. He wasn't a steroid-era pitcher for the most part. And, again, I'm not trying to diminish what his accomplishments were, but I was more lukewarm on him than I was with Alan Trammell. Alan Trammell should have been in a long time ago. Jack Morris, he ended up getting in. And, kind of had the same feeling like Jim Rice when he got in. Jim Rice got into the Hall of Fame simply because there was kind of a lack of good candidates around, and he finally was able to get in through the Veterans Committee. Same thing here with Jack Morris getting in after his ballot had been expired. And for Alan Trammell to get in, that's great. Well, way overdue. He should have been in a long time ago. Jack Morris, on the other hand, like I said, it would have been hard for me to say that he should have been a Hall of Famer, but he is in. And it's a big thing for the Tigers, and they'll retire both of those numbers, as you said, in August, and we'll get to put them up in Comerica Park with the rest of the Hall of Fame Tigers that have had their numbers retired.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I pointed out, better late than never.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, you get guys in there, but when they have these types of votes, you try to think, are they voting them in because they deserve to be in there, or are they just doing it so they can say they put guys in there? Because the Baseball Hall of Fame has traditionally been one of the hardest ones to get into. If you look at all the major sports, Baseball Hall of Fame for the longest time, it was very difficult to get in. And there were some eras that you had a lot of deserving candidates they had put by the wayside. And I agree with the Veterans Committee that they need to have guys that maybe didn't get in at certain times because of other players that were in the same era that they were. But to put guys into the Hall of Fame now, it feels like it's more of a politically imbalanced process. And we'll see who gets voted in here in the next couple of years. But this modern era committee now is what they've called it. They're starting to vote guys in, and we'll see if other players that have been snubbed or forgotten by the Hall of Fame voters in the regular rotation will be able to get in enshrined by that modern era committee.
Uh-huh. So, those are all the teams that we covered in our weekend review episode. Now it's time for our 5 questions segment.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth.
Question number 1. What will happen to Lions head coach Jim Caldwell when the NFL season wraps up?
That's an interesting question. And the reason it's interesting is because we don't know his contract status other than we know that he was extended. Is it a team option? Is it something else? There's a lot of things that weigh into that. I think that Jim Caldwell, at the end of the season, if they don't make the playoffs, shouldn't be the head coach anymore. But if they win out and they go 10-6
and make the playoffs,
they're going to look at that and they're going to say, well, they didn't make the playoffs, but they were 10-6. And are they going to continue to go down this road where they say, even though you don't make the playoffs, you had a good record, so we'll keep them around? It also depends on the guys that are available. And that's one of those things that you just can't really predict with any certainty is who's going to be available after the NFL season is done. Is there going to be a coach that gets whacked that maybe didn't deserve to, and the Lions want to take a look at him? Is there going to be a candidate that really knocks their socks off and they have to have? I don't know if I see that, but you have to think that Bob Quinn, who came into this situation without his own staff, really has to be thinking that he wants to be able to put his own guys in there, hire his own head coach, and really start to put his mark on the team. I mean, he's drafted for 2 years now. His drafts have been a little bit more successful than his predecessors. There's still some question marks out there, as there are with almost any NFL draft. But I think if you're Bob Quinn, you'd really like to try to give it a go with the guy that you picked instead of a guy that's being forced upon you. And so to answer the question in a really roundabout way, do I think that Jim Caldwell will be back with the Lions? It depends. And it's hard to say right now. But my inclination is no. Just with all the things that have been going on this year and the way that they've played and the expectations that they had, I don't see how he survives them not making the playoffs, but stranger things have happened.
Just like you pointed out, they're not prepared. The coaching staff, including Jim Caldwell, doesn't prepare them too well.
No, and you look at Jim Caldwell's career, I mean, he's not a winning coach.
No.
He had Peyton Manning for a couple of years, great, but he doesn't have Peyton Manning anymore. And
he was an offensive coordinator, too.
Right. I mean, and they have Matt Stafford, but when you don't prepare, it doesn't matter who you have at quarterback, it's tough to win. And in today's NFL, one player doesn't make a team. And Matt Stafford, for all his improvements and all his play the last couple of years, they've really been, as a team, falling short of expectations. So you have to start to look at where that's coming from, and more, all signs point to the coaching staff, and even some of the players in their comments, such as Golden Tate and Darius Slay have made in the last couple of weeks. They don't think it's the players that they have around them. They think it's the coaches. They have not adequately prepared them to play against teams in the NFL. And that kind of thinking bears out because look at the performances they've had even today against Tampa Bay. I mean, they were running the same. They ran the same play basically on the goal line twice, and both times the Detroit Lions didn't stop it. And that's the kind of stuff that gets people fired is when you can't adjust to the opponent, especially one like Tampa Bay. Some things are going on there, and the players do the best they can, and sometimes they'll make mistakes. But if you're not going to put them in a position to win, that goes back to the coaching staff. The coaching staff has to make their players better. I don't think that this coaching staff has done.
Yeah, it's a very tough question to ask. If you ask me, let's see here. So that's question number one.
Next question.
Question number two, how big of a momentum swing is Michigan's win over UCLA last Saturday afternoon?
Well, it's huge. It's very big for them. Yeah. Having lost the game in the fashion they did to Ohio State and how they played in the first, I would say, 15 minutes of the game against UCLA, that was a real big win for them. And if they lose that game against UCLA, I'm not going to say their season's over by any stretch of the imagination, but boy, losing 2 games where you just can't put it in the basket, and you end up coming up with a big second half, getting into overtime, and then really dominating them in overtime. I think that was a huge win for Michigan, and now that they get into some other non-conference games before they get into Big Ten play, hopefully that's a springboard for them. They play Texas on Tuesday. They can beat Texas and go into the last part of that non-conference schedule where they're playing teams that they should beat. They can set themselves up well for a Big Ten run. Now, do I think they're going to win the conference by any stretch of the imagination? No. I think Michigan State has that covered pretty well. That's the team to beat in the Big Ten. But again, for Michigan, their goal isn't the Big Ten. If you're looking at what they deem as successful, if they can win 20-plus games and get into the NCAA tournament, that's success for them. And John Beilein, year in and year out, does a great coaching job, is able to put his team in positions to win. And so far, they've been able to do that. And if they win that game against UCLA like they did, you would hope that it gives them a little bit of a boost as they play through the rest of the non-conference schedule.
Next question.
Question number 3, has Boban Marjanovic played better than Andre Drummond offensively as a center for the Pistons lately?
Well, you'd have to say yes, and the reason you'd have to say it is just by the pure math. Now, again, you're looking at very small sample sizes for Boban Marjanovic, so it's hard to say that he's better if you play him for 25 minutes. We don't know that, and I don't think we ever will, because I don't think he'll get that type of playing time, but he's proven effective in short spurts. And I think that for Andre Drummond, who's struggling right now offensively, it wouldn't be such a bad thing for him to sit down a little bit. But like I mentioned earlier, you take him out, now you lose your best rebounder. And he's your best rebounder by far. And that really is a catalyst for them, because when you play a team game like the Pistons do, and Stan Van Gundy likes to have that inside-out game, you need guys to get the ball back. Because if you're not shooting well from outside, you need guys to get the ball back in the hands of your front court players and see if you can't give it another go. And Andre Drummond gives them that, but at the same time, his offensive performance over the last 3 or 4 games hasn't been that great. And
especially his last 2.
You gotta look at it and try to figure out, strike some balance between having him in there as a defensive and rebounding force versus scoring points on the other end when you get those opportunities. So it's a tough spot for Stan Van Gundy, but I think that with the way that Boban Marjanovic has played offensively, he has been very good in his limited time offensively, and it should warrant him a couple more minutes, especially if they continue to struggle to score on the front court like they have the last 2 games. And the other thing you have to think about is if Drummond's sitting, you'd hope that would motivate him to step up his game, and if that's what it takes, well, then I'm all for it.
Wouldn't hurt for Stan Van Gundy to try to give Boban extra extended time. Question number 4.
Yeah.
Yep. Question number 4. Is Red Wings general manager Ken Holland almost reaching his boiling point after his Red Wings got humiliated 6-1 by the St. Louis Blues at Little Caesars Arena and humiliated 3 times in their last 4 games in totality?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about a boiling point, there's not much for them to do as far as changing out players. You look at Grand Rapids, their farm affiliate right now, they're struggling as well. Losing another game today. And there's not a lot of guys that you could drop down and pick up from there and make an impact on the big club. So we could go in depth, as we have many times, about Ken Holland's faults. But at this point, you got to work with what you've got. And right now, for him to try to make any changes, the trade market's going to be relatively quiet because you're coming up on the Christmas holiday. And you can't really reach down into the minors for guys because I don't think that they're going to be markedly better if they do that. And if you're looking at the long-term effects, you got to think, okay, well, we're not going to make the playoffs. Let's see what these kids can do, which is what we always clamor for, because the Red Wings fail to give their young players extended looks and extended playing time when they get those looks. And for Ken Holland to reach his boiling point and start moving guys around, I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that. I really think that even though they're struggling mightily in this last couple of weeks, I just don't know what he's going to be able to do. So while he might not like it, he's made that bed and now he's got to lay in it. And he can be mad at him all he wants, but he's probably got to look in the mirror and say, I didn't give myself many outs on this one, and they're playing poorly, but I just don't have anybody else available that I can put back into that lineup from wherever and get better results. So he probably isn't real happy, as he shouldn't be, but yeah, I would think when you're talking about a boiling point, you're talking about making major changes, and in the middle of the season, it's tough to do when you're in a team like the Detroit Red Wings are in the position that they are, because they're not dealing from position of strength. They don't have a lot of depth at the defensive positions, and if you're going to fire a coach, you got to have somebody ready. They do have somebody in John Torchetti that has NHL coaching experience, so if they were to make a move, I think that he would probably be the guy that would step up and take the team on the rest of the way. If Blashill were to be fired, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I think they're just going to try to stay the course like they always do and see what happens.
Yeah, because Chris Ilitch has no passion.
Right. That's the kind of thing that if you're the owner and you watch your team get hammered like that, that's where you start to say, you got to start calling guys out and just say, hey, you got to play better. And it doesn't seem like they're really doing that externally. So,
and he's not calling anybody out.
Well, if you're not going to do that, then
sell them.
What motivation do the players have? I mean, if you go do your job badly and nothing happens, well, that's kind of on you as the owner and or the GM.
Yeah, and if you're not going to be held accountable or call anybody out, you might as well just sell the team because you don't have any control or any passion for sports left like your father did, Mike Ilitch, when he was alive.
Right. At this point, they're just kind of a rudderless ship, and Chris Ilitch is, even though he's a very micromanaging type of owner, he's really got a lot more involvement with the Tigers as far as that goes than he does with the Red Wings from all accounts. So I just think he's going to kind of stand back and let Ken Holland make his own decisions and make his own bed, and we've seen how that's played out in the past.
Next question.
And finally, question number 5. Did Alan Trammell and Jack Morris both deserve an extra chance at the Hall of Fame from the modern day era? Yes, I definitely know that they did. I bet you did too.
Well, they both did deserve an extra shot. Jack Morris, for the longest time, if you look at his contemporaries, when he was voted into the Hall of Fame, or when he was up for voting for the Hall of Fame, excuse me, he had to go against a lot of guys that were really good. And to hold that against him is tough. But you also look at his career. I mean, he didn't win 300 games. He had almost 4 ERA. And you get into those advanced statistics, and he wasn't the most dominating pitcher. And I think that for his chances to get in the Hall of Fame, once those passed by, a lot of people had some strong feelings about that. But you look at the pitchers that were voted in ahead of him. I mean, they weren't voting in just anybody. And for him to get an extra shot is nice, and he's finally able to get into the Hall of Fame. But, again, did they deserve a shot? Yes, I think that they did. And Alan Trammell should have been in well before this. Jack Morris still is on that edge. I mean, he was great in the playoffs. He was a tremendous postseason pitcher. But can you judge a whole career based on a small sample size of less than 20 games? That's a tough question. And whether or not he's deserving, that question now is done because he's in the Hall of Fame. But I just don't know if the extra chance that he got was something that really accurately depicts where he was in the whole atmosphere of top-notch pitchers of the 80s. I just don't, but he's in, and it's now irrefutable. And they both get to make it in, and they both get to have their numbers retired.
True. So that wraps up our 5-question segment, and to our entire audience, if you want to answer those 5 questions, just replay that segment portion of this episode and answer them the best you can without going out of line.
Pencils down, everyone. It's time to find out what's your grade.
One thing we forgot to mention is that the current Tigers in today's world agreeing with and signing former Houston Astros starting pitcher Mike Fiers on a 1-year, $6 million deal, and that's our only event to grade tonight. The Tigers signing Fiers to the 1-year, $6 million deal. Buck, what's your grade on that one?
I'm going to go with the C+ on that, and the reason I go with that is because last year did not have his best year. Had a propensity to give up a lot of home runs, but he's also playing in Minute Maid Park, which is not exactly the best pitcher's park. When you're talking about home runs, he didn't have a great 2017, but if you look at his career, mostly with Milwaukee in the National League before he was traded to Houston, he was okay in 2016. He's going to be your 4 or 5 guy. The one thing I would have to say is that it kind of reminds me of the Mike Pelfrey signing, where they sign a guy who they think should be good based on a lot of other factors, and it really kind of is a mirage based on the fact that
Total mirage.
You're looking for a guy to fill that 4 or 5 spot, but when you get a guy that is pitching with limited attempts, he had 28 games started last year. He went 8-10, had a 5.22 ERA, and gave up 32 home runs in those 28 starts. That's tough to overlook, and maybe they think it was a bad year. Maybe something injury-wise that he was bothered by, whatever it might be. He just didn't have a great year. So for the Tigers to reach out and make a grab for him, I don't necessarily disagree with it because they're not going to be a very good team. So that's why I kind of give it a C+, kind of rests right in the middle because he needed somebody to pitch those innings. The one thing I would say about him is, Mike Fiers, is that he's going to be able to take the ball, and I think he's more suited for a middle relief role, but he's been a starter for pretty much his whole career, and being as it is, they're gonna get what they paid for, and if he pitches well, great, but he's going to be playing for a team that really isn't projected to do much, and I just don't know if signing him when you look at who they have available, is it better for somebody else to get those starts and kind of learn on the job, or is it better to sign a 33-year-old guy and see if he can't make a go of it? So I give it a C+ simply because the Tigers aren't supposed to do a whole lot. They're not going to be very good, and they're not getting him a ton of money at $6 million a year. They're looking at other projects as well. The one thing to note is Ron Gardenhire as manager. They have hired former Cubs pitching coach Chris Bosio, and Chris Bosio did turn some guys around when he was in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at reclamation projects, Mike Fiers could be one of those guys. Maybe he gets them squared away and gets them on the path of success. But when you're looking at a guy who's 33 years old, as Mike Fiers will be, I mean, how much success are you going to expect out of him? Because he's on the back end of his career.
I'll take the Chris Bosio hiring, which is one thing I'll take. So that's our What's Your Grade segment. So for our audience, if they have a grade for that event, post that in the comment bank in this episode, and please don't go out of line. That's episode 294. That's episode 294, the Week in Review on the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Spreaker, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio. Before we sign off, we want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media and have their friends share that as well, because we want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast is boosting its posts of each episode on its Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth, and trying to widen and broaden their audience that is fans of sports and local advertising sponsors in the future. Buck, Geno, great job as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips and Buck Geno at BuckGeno3rd. Like and share the Michigan Sports Truth Facebook page and join its Facebook groups. 2 of them. We'll talk to you next week on episode 295. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. TTFN, ta-ta for now.
MST.
Mission complete.